Thank you, Jessica, and thank you to the Organic Center for the invitation to have this panel. I was so proud to share with my dad, who farms organically in Nebraska, that I had an opportunity to be here, in which, after responding with high interest to the conference, he quickly pointed out that technology is often overrated. And as any good independent child would, I'm here to really push the boundaries of what's possible and tell you a bit more about OpenTEAM. So at OpenTEAM, we're working to make visible the opportunity for knowledge sharing and community building through technology, and point to a process and an end result that aligns with the core values of my dad, and I think to the core principles of the organic movement, which some define broadly as fairness, health, ecology, and care. And as we've heard today, the risks with technology in ag are great, especially as it relates to racial and gender equity and inclusion, farm workers, and the future of where the broader ag industry is headed. And with these risks that are real and visible to us, we also see great opportunity for addressing these barriers through the use of technology with a community-driven approach to its development. So as Samir shared earlier today, I loved this, technology is exacerbating. And to me, and I think at OpenTEAM, we can see it going both ways, and we really want to promote the possibilities of what's possible for community-driven technology development. So OpenTEAM, or Open Technology Ecosystem for Agricultural Management, is a collaborative community of farmers, ranchers, scientists, researchers, technologists, farm service providers, and food companies supporting a localized yet global food system that is a resilient driver for healthy soil, healthy food for all, and equity for thriving communities. Facilitated by Wilson Center for Agriculture and the Environment in Freeport, Maine, OpenTEAM uses an open source tech and collaborative approach to equip food systems leaders with the tools they need to support land stewards in their journeys toward better soil health. Our approach is driven by the possibility and the necessity for democratizing access to the best knowledge around soil health. And our members are thus co-creating a tech ecosystem built on open source principles that can enable community-driven development and bridge between public, private, tribal, and nonprofit entities. The next year will be focused for OpenTEAM on ground truthing this work with our hub, farm, and ranch networks, and testing a concept called the iData Wallet, a place where farm and field level data is stored and under the control of the farmer to be shared securely for their benefit and at their will. And I think you might hear a bit more about that with our panelists. So today's discussion will dive into what members of the OpenTEAM have been learning and doing on this journey with a great panel of perspectives. And we'll get a chance to discuss barriers they see with technology and equity in agriculture, possible solutions and opportunities they see to address these barriers, and also how the role of community and collaboration play out in this work. So I'm reminded that I need to slow down, that I'm speaking maybe too quickly for translating. So I'm going to work on that. So let's transition to our wonderful panelists. I just ask each of you to introduce yourselves and tell us how you came to OpenTEAM. So let's start with Crystal.
Hi, thank you for having me today. I've worked with OpenTEAM for the last couple of years. I first learned of OpenTEAM while working on a project with the University of BC, providing consultation around organic certification requirements and user experience design as they're developing a farm management app called Light Farm. I was very intrigued by the diversity of collaboration within OpenTEAM and the common goal of using tech to improve sustainable farming methods and equitable collaborative relationships. I've joined their human-centered design group to act as a liaison between the tech world and the farmers on the ground. And I also joined the Equity Collabothon to learn and expand my understanding of the various barriers that our farmers are facing around the world. I learned a lot, but I still feel like I know very little. I've learned so much today. Thank you to all the amazing speakers. I want to keep learning, because the one thing that I have learned is that equity is an every moment endeavor. Every moment is an opportunity to shift into equitable behavior. And equity should not be an afterthought. It should be included right from the beginning of every project. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much. LaKisha.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is LaKisha Odom, and I'm with the Foundation for Food and Agriculture Research. I've been working with OpenTEAM since its inception. I'm a funder, so we look for opportunities to fund what we view as potentially transformative research. And we thought that the OpenTEAM model was something we had not seen before, looking at ways to connect, all with the goal of improving decision-making for farmers, was really exciting to us. And the other piece that we were really intrigued by is the implication for small and mid-sized farmers and providing decision support to them. So it's been very exciting watching the work of OpenTEAM grow, evolve on additional partners, and then now moving more firmly into this space where tackling questions of equity and ensuring that whatever technology is developed, we're ensuring that it's put into the hands of all farmers. So that's been really great to be a part of.
Thank you. And Pablo.
Hi, everyone, and thanks for inviting me to this panel. And it's been a very enriching and inspiring morning, or day for those of you who are in the East Coast. And yeah, it's been incredible to listen to all of these approaches to equality, inclusion. I myself come from Mexico, and for years I worked with farmers in Mexico and Latin America that were mostly communities, cooperatives, many of them indigenous farmers. And my work was more than technology, about market access. So these were communities that were well organized for farming, and some of them were ready to sell their products to other markets, including export markets. So I started working with them, and I just realized that the one aspect of their work that people were more interested in is how their communities worked and what their relationship to their ecosystems were. So it was the story that people wanted, and I did that a lot. I worked with them, got their stories, shared their stories with local and distant consumers, and created this connection. And that's in this technology world, my approach to agriculture is basically by offering story sharing platform that brings farmer stories to consumers. Now, that's how I got to know OpenTEAM, and I was invited to share some of my work there. And I am ever since a part of it. And even now, collaborating in another project of OpenTEAM, which is the Farmers Coffee Shop. We'll have maybe a chance to talk a little more about it in a few minutes. I am now relocated in the Bay Area in San Francisco.
Wonderful. So I think we see how we have kind of a diversity of viewpoints on the tech side, kind of global side, research and funder, and so it should make a good conversation today. Let's start with really the barriers that you've seen within your places and with the work that you're doing as it relates to addressing equity in technology. and how some of the barriers you've seen, you've come to this work around technology through it. Let's start with Crystal.
Thanks, Laura. So I recently read a report that was developed by the Farmers for Climate Solutions, which is a coalition of farmers and agricultural organizations located in Canada. They're working on equity, inclusion, policy change, along with sustainable farm management. And they identified three main barriers: access to financing, access to land, and access to information. And this is also what I've seen as in my role as an organic certification body administrator. So financing, I still am boggled that there's still so much prejudice in just the ability to qualify for loans. And that's demonstrating systemic inequities right there. As the saying goes, money begets money. So if you're part of an equity deserving group, or maybe you're just like young, a new farmer, you may not have the money or the assets needed that you're supposed to have to generate money. So it's a difficult system to break into. So many of these farmers are relying on off-farm work to supplement their income until they can start actually accumulating their wealth. Even though they're fully capable of running a successful farm, even though the community needs them for local food security, they're still not really able to access that finance. Grants are amazing, but you know, if you think about an individual trying to find, apply for, and then report on all of the grant requirements, and then throw some language barriers in there, and you know, that just kind of demonstrates some other systemic inequalities that are built into the grant process, in my opinion. So the cost for organic certification can be a limiting factor, especially for smaller organic farms. These costs can be compounded if you live like well outside of city hubs. If you're living rural, remote, you actually get penalized because a lot of times you have to pay for your inspector's annual visit. So all the travel fees add up, and the further away you are, the more those fees become. And that goes along with their regenerative certification. So if you want that, you have to get an organic certification first, and then a regenerative certification, and you have to pay for inspectors for each. So it really adds up. And, you know, farmers have to balance the cost of certification versus how much can they actually sell their product for? Is there a market for it? How far do they have to transport their food to make that beneficial? And then does a certification provider offer equivalency with other countries even? So that all has to factor into your financial decisions. Access barriers. I live and work in British Columbia, Canada. I want to acknowledge this is the home of the Coetson First Nations, Coastal Salish people. And I encourage you guys to visit the website nativeland.ca. I'll throw a link in there. It's got an excellent interactive map where you can learn about information about the Indigenous territories where you live as well. The pricing here for land has just, I mean, it's just ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous. And, you know, people can barely afford just housing, never mind an acreage that they can farm on. So that puts a lot of folks in the position of leasing land if they can find it. And when you're leasing land, that's going to create more barriers because it's going to affect what infrastructure you decide to establish. You know, you're not going to build something that you can't then disassemble and move with you. It's going to affect whether or not you want to participate in rotational grazing of your cattle, because that's going to involve a lot more fencing costs. That, you know, if you're just leasing, it doesn't really make sense. You're not going to plant perennial crops, which, you know, are good for for mitigating climate change, and just, you know, the commitment to regenerative practices as a whole. If you're leasing land, the carbon credit system, from my understanding, you know, you have to start with a baseline, and then it can take 5 years before you can see the changes and then actually benefit from those carbon credits. So who's benefiting? Is it the person that's leasing the land, or is it the owner of the land? So, you know, looking at maybe figuring out ways to find solutions to that issue alone. And then the other barrier is access to information. So, you know, again, a lot of equity deserving groups end up having to move further from the cities to you know, be able to find land. And these rural areas, there can be it can be difficult to break into the community. It can be difficult to find local suppliers and to learn about locally specific environmental conditions and trends. And believe it or not, sometimes there's not even internet. So, you know, internet access in Canada alone is, it's actually a pretty major factor for a lot of people. So just not being able to connect and to get information that they need to do a good job on their farms. I'll mention a couple other barriers that to consider, and one of them is perspective. So the dominant cultural perspective is really focused on possession and extraction of resources. And what I've learned from working with Terra Ethics, which is also a part of OpenTEAM, Terra Ethics is an organization advocating for equitable practices for people in the environment. They really promote the idea of an ecosystems lens perspective. And this is a holistic approach for the well-being of all. So seeing things a bit differently, seeing how we can all work together and benefit together. It's a real shift in perspective, realizing that just like plants and animals have to live symbiotically in nature, we're animals. We should be striving for the same relationship with nature. We're learning that all the critters and the microbes and the fungi and the soil are needed. They have to work together to form a healthy soil environment. And this is, as was spoken about earlier, it's this perspective that's held by many Indigenous groups around the world, that we're all connected, and we're connected with the natural world around us. So rather than an attitude of this is mine, I can profit from it, I own it, how can we become better land stewards and function better together? And in the organic certification, originally started as a grassroots philosophy about the well-being of people and planet and producing healthy food. It's become very regulated. It's evolved into to place importance on following a set of rules, which is important, and it gives it's good for consumer confidence. But I worry that we're we're losing some of that original perspective that focused on the benefits of, like, the intention behind growing organically as a holistic systemic philosophy. I've heard recently even some of our organic inspectors who most of them have a background in like agrology are feeling quite disconnected from nature, and they're they love being in the field, but they're finding that now they're basically just box checkers for transparency. And just one more thing I'll mention is tech barriers. So the concept of precision agriculture and using tech to benefit the environment and to improve your profitability is widely accepted by farmers. And I think farmers are generally willing to try new things. But of course, the barriers of cost of the software, cost of the equipment, it can really factor in. And then also time barriers. So for a farmer to invest in new technology, they need to spend time learning it. They need to input all their data, and they're busy working, right? So it's hard for them. And many of these tech tools that have been designed are for large scale producers. So these smaller biodiverse farms, they're not benefiting. They spend all their energy in putting all their data, and at the end of the day, they're sold fertilizer. So I think ensuring new technology is actually designed for and benefiting the end user is of utmost importance. I know it sounds a little bit depressing, but I think we're going to talk about some possible solutions. So I'll pass the mic. Thank you.
Thank you, Crystal. And I just want to mention as we get going, we have, almost an hour, 40 minutes left, 45, and we'd love to hear from you questions. I think we have time in the chat and time in our discussion allotted for questions coming through chat. So feel free to ask them. Pablo, LaKisha, any additional barriers you'd like to name before we move to another question?
I would add only because Crystal did an excellent job. I think because I sit in a funder space, I see some of the barriers from a different perspective. So definitely agree with the barriers around technology and information. But I also think that there's a lack of large scale coordination among federal programs in the public and private sector. There's a lot of opportunity, I think, to be more efficient and effective in how we solve these challenges, but there's just sometimes fragmentation that does exist in the space, not quite understanding the landscape of everyone working in the space. And then, plus wanting again the need for additional tools and support that are designed with equity in mind. I think one of the things that I always say is I'm often in rooms where we're having conversations about sustainability. That is to me the future of agriculture, but there aren't always people that look like me in that room. And so the question is, as we design these new opportunities, as we think about the future, just being clear about who's at the table and who's taking a part of the conversations as we design our future agricultural system. And I think having these types of conversations where we are inviting that shift in perspective that I think we all have experienced today is really valuable in how we think about how we would design for the future.
I would say, I would add, or maybe looking at things from completing all of these ideas. Let's suppose that we can address all these barriers and that we can really democratize technology for farmers. I would say my question would be, what is important? Technology per se, it's not really what, at least from where I see things, it's not really what's most important. I think we stick to the fundamental values of land and people, soil. From what I've heard today, there's dimensions that are multiple and complex, spiritual and scientific. And we talk about soil health and soul health at the same time, and their interconnections. So I think technology, it's just facilitating this process, maybe enabling many things. I would think not really how do we democratize technology or make it more accessible, but how do we create technology for equity? Technology itself should be designed to create equity and to create inclusion. And yeah, that's kind of where my mind is right now about all these questions and interesting information that we're getting.
That's really beautiful. And I'll be stewing on that as well about how we can create technology for equity. And I'd welcome anyone within the chat to also just name any barriers that they see and want to contribute to this conversation. I know it's nearing the end of the conference, and we'd love just your participation in this conversation. All right, so we obviously have a lot of challenges that we all face collectively. And I think to LaKisha's point, you know, at OpenTEAM, we're really about this coordination effort around building community and building technology for equity. And so from your vantage points, how is OpenTEAM and the work you're doing addressing some of those barriers? Let's start with LaKisha.
Okay, I'm happy to answer this question. I think, especially when we're thinking about making technology and tools more accessible, more integrated, and encouraging more coordination, I feel like OpenTEAM is a poster child for kind of these values. I think that one of the most exciting aspects of OpenTEAM has been the coordination that we have seen, the education that we have seen. I think it's really valuable to have a webinar series, for example, explaining how different tools work and the potential to work together. Also looking at opportunities to coordinate with federal partners, private sector partners, non-federal partners, all to ensure that there is cohesiveness across the space. And I think the last piece that is really exciting to me is looking at our hub farms, looking at how these real life examples can be the foundation of testing different tools and ensuring that they are, you know, ground truths in what is useful to the farmer. Yep, I'll stop there.
Thank you. Crystal, Pablo, anything to add?
Well, I guess what OpenTEAM is doing, one of the main values I see is how all the work that's being done, it's basically accessible. There are concepts that per se lay out the foundation for a very equitable and accessible technology, say things like open code, and where folks are developing things that others can take and then build on them. And that's one thing. Another is our approach to data, with this idea of consolidating farmers' data in one sort of digital container that will save farmers a lot of time. And once they are in this circuit of information and connection, can have access to many other resources without having to, again, onboard their information one time and another. So that's, I think, all of these guidelines in whatever technology we develop as a group are making it simpler and more accessible from the design. It's designed to do that. So I think that's another good contribution.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and we use kind of the mantra of entering data once, using it many times, and for many purposes at OpenTEAM. So, you know, especially as an organic farmer, I think you have all this documentation required generally for the practices and procedures you use for certification. And all of that data can be used for many different purposes. And so our hope at OpenTEAM, through this process of collaboration and coordination with certifying bodies, with supply chain partners that work with the organic sector, even with USDA, OpenTEAM is working to create a cohesive tech ecosystem where data can be entered once and used many times. And that's kind of where that idea of the ag data wallet comes in. And Crystal, I think, really covers that point about a farmer who is good at farming. They don't have a lot of time and extra money to spend on documentation for the sake of it and data for the sake of it. So really putting it back into their control. Great. Crystal, yeah.
Maybe I could jump in there too, and just talk about record keeping a bit. I know it was discussed really well today, which is great. And it is a necessary evil, but it can be a real barrier. You know, records are needed for regulatory agencies, and also to give insight into the profitability of your farm and impacts on the environment that you might be making. And a lot of these farmers have just incredible memories. Not like me, but you know, how does that information pass on to the next generation if everything is in their head, right? And we are seeing that a lot of farmers aging out of the industry. How are we going to retain that knowledge and wisdom that has been built over years of practice and insight into their environment? You know, even if they had kept paper notebooks and journals, it's still really hard to see the patterns and trends and, you know, using a journal. So tech can really support in that, I believe. And in BC, we have developed some great record keeping software. I'll mention, so one of them is iCertify, which is free to use. And it's an online application renewal program for organic certification. And one of the reasons that I like it is, well, it's free to use. That's always a good start. And it really simplifies the process for people, especially new farmers. So it really walks you through the steps of, this is exactly what you need to provide us with. These are the forms that you need to maintain throughout the season. And that the program actually includes record keeping templates, and the templates are designed to capture the information that the inspectors and certification committees need to review specifically. So you're not wasting time recording information that may not be useful for your audits. You know, it also stores the operator's information there. So it's like having your file folder right there. Everything's all in one place. It has education built in with references to the standard. It also has a list of products that are approved for use in organic production. And that helps build community because, you know, a lot of the certifying bodies are regional. So they'll just certify like a specific geographical area. And by having access to this database, you can find someone in your area that's going to have supplies for you. In doing that, you know, it also is going to be able to collect a lot of data about the organic industry, and that data can be used by the government or organic sector to help inform policy. Yeah, and I mean, I think that research has really, you know, there's this real push to measure sustainable farm practices, but these small biodiverse farms and indigenous knowledge and practices has not really been well represented in research. I do want to acknowledge the fact that a lot of these new sustainable regenerative practices are not new. So they have been used by indigenous groups extensively in the past. I really connected with the ideas that Ade spoke about earlier today, that there is a loss in value by simply repackaging these methods as regenerative. This diverse way of knowing, it holds the missing knowledge. So we need all the voices at the table to understand what's really happening in the world around us as well. She talked a little bit about putting data, you know, collecting all this data and all of these putting a number to everything. And we've done that as well a little bit. But Lightfarm is a tool that is part of OpenTEAM, and it's free, open source. It was developed by UBC, and it's designed for organic record keeping and to quantify some of these sustainable farming practices for research, but hoping that it's going to capture some more of the data from these smaller biodiverse farms as well.
Yes. Thanks so much, Crystal. And with Lightfarm too, it's an example where partnered with OpenTEAM's community, really exploring how digital certification can can work better for not only the Pacific Northwest and in Canada and UBC, but also beyond that. So feel free to join us speaking to this Organic Center audience in this journey and collaborating on that. I see there's a question that came through by Kelly. Would love to hear about how lending and access to capital has worked for land that is cooperatively owned. Are there notable successes or challenges? Any initial response to that, panelists?
Well, I can respond on a small scale.
Yeah.
It's a little bit less about lending, but more just about sharing. You know, we're starting to try to see some more policies in organics, like sharing access. So, you know, if you can't get the access to actually buy land, then we're trying to do like land matching with people so that you can have a mentor on an organic farm. Like a lot of the organic farms that we have, they have excess land even, right? So they're only growing their crops in these few acres, and they have other land that's certified. It's, you know, there's nothing happening there. So if we can get people on that land and share in that, then they can actually, our incubator policy allows them to sell their products as organic right away, and they're being mentored by this organic farm, and that can help to save some of the costs in finding that land. But
great. Thanks for sharing that, Crystal. I just put a link to the Agrarian Land Trust as well as a potential resource for answering that question more so. But I think that there are ways that the Agrarian Commons and others are looking at policy opportunities that can make it easier for lending and access to capital with cooperative land tenure, if you will. But I am definitely not the expert on that. Yes, land sharing as a concept for land access. Definitely agree with that. All right. All right. So let's also talk more. And I feel like it's really been a theme today on community and either its neglect on the farm worker side or just the lack of respect or regard for Indigenous lifeways or pathways for knowledge, and just acknowledging that as OpenTEAM, we are a community-driven process. How can technology actually support, emphasize, or empower the networks of trust that exist in the world in agriculture or in farming or people who steward the land? Yeah. Pablo, would you like to start?
Yeah, well, I'd like to two things that come to my mind. One is my own experience when I was working with Global South farmers, to put it that way. And I worked with farming communities a lot. Many of them were well organized, or at least willing to get organized to tackle problems that had to do with their agricultural systems, and then how to access markets and or have regional markets, etc. And I think the one thing I respect is that they were taking care of their own solutions. So it was not like someone from the global north or the big cities came with a formula for them, which is many times the approach. But it was more like just laying out resources that might be available, but it was basically communities that organized themselves based on their own ideology and their own customs and their culture that approached them, the solution making. That's one thing. The other thing is, I think about my current work or our current work as storytellers. So ours is our technology. It's basically facilitating or laying out a platform to connect farmers and consumers. So when I think about community, I think about the place-based level of community, like people who are farming together and living together, and that level. And then I also think about the larger community that we form when we eat this food, as whether that is your regional and local farmers, or even in a larger scale. I can easily see how cocoa producers in Ghana that are depending on markets that are basically the output of their product is in the US, and companies that are working on fair trade and community engagement. So there's a very large community, international community of people that are consuming the foods, people that are growing the foods, and just making those links that are vital evident. That's the one thing that we'd like. And then we thought, we live in a world where anyone can take their smartphone right now and take a picture or themselves or just communicate each other. So storytelling is now really accessible. But what are we paying attention to? What are we using our small screens? So if we think about it, there's a lot of people dancing, a lot of new products, flashy things. When do we take our smartphones and take a look at where the lettuce on our salad was grown and how, and the people, the faces who grew that? So we thought, yeah, that could happen. It's maybe just a shift in our attention and maybe the channels that need to be established. But if we create that would be a way to then reawaken these vital links between the land, the people, and form community, create community that way. We should all be completely aware of where things come from, who made them, and what the communities and ecosystems involved are like. That's kind of our vision.
I think there's a really beautiful storyline there that I think makes you a really good storyteller and perfect for the role at LookInto. So thank you.
Yes, I would echo what you say there, Pablo, because I think it's really important for people to understand where their food is coming from. And I live on and food security is a serious issue. If the ferry stops running, the stores get empty pretty fast, and that's not just living on an island, that's everywhere. And I think that the general public needs to appreciate more how much work goes into growing food, and that somebody is willing to do it just down the street. And so learning their stories, I think, is really a good way to do that. And I also, we've also seen an increase in sales platforms to promote like CSA box programs, and even programs where, because if we're dealing with a lot of small farms, they can work together actually in these farm hubs and sell their products together as opposed to trying to be their own CSA. And I think that's also a really great way to showcase your local farmers and to get that community building working together. People can crop plan with each other, and I'll grow the carrots this year, you grow the potatoes, and and united we'll have a really good box program.
Yeah, that is true.
Yes, I love that.
I just shared that link to some of the stories that have been created in our platform. There are many stories there that come from farmers themselves. And we talk a lot about first voice storytelling. This is just the beginning. It's going to evolve, and it's going to become a lot more social and farmer based. But there are some farmer stories. We think like there's a lot of the discourse connecting farms and consumers are now driven by the brands themselves, like maybe the intermediaries in some way, many times in a beautiful way, oftentimes in a beautiful way, like taking you to the farm. But first voice is important. Farmers speaking is important. Understanding and us being attentive, and really listening to what they're saying. That's important. That dialogue needs to happen in our society right now. We are in a very, very critical point as humankind. We are aware of this, I guess. The last 2 years have been brutal and have brutally reawakened us to the fact that what we do is actually important. As consumers, we build the reality that we are seeing. So let's not think about reality out there as something that's happening and us as disconnected from that, because that's absolutely not true. We are building that reality, and more than anything, with things we eat every day. Other how we transport ourselves and the clothing we use, that all of that is affecting, but I think eating is what really creates the landscapes that we see in the world.
Couldn't agree more. Thanks, Pablo. And LaKisha, I'd be curious to hear from you too on the role of community as you see it from FFAR's perspective and the work you're doing in research.
Absolutely. One of the things that I mentioned earlier is just an excitement for those types of projects that do work in this communal way. I think that progress can only really be achieved by working in this manner. But one of the things I think Crystal touched on that I literally had a conversation about yesterday was thinking about how community could be used to provide additional market access. I was having conversations with some small holder Black belt farmers in Alabama and thinking through, they have opportunity to engage at a corporate level. They have invitations from, example, Walmart to carry their watermelon, but they can't produce the volume necessary to actually meet the need. So there's an opportunity for them, but individually, they were not successful trying to meet these needs alone. And so thinking about ways in which we could utilize technology to potentially open up additional markets. Laura and I had that conversation yesterday, and it was one of the first times I thought about technology being used for that. You know, we think about, making ease of record keeping or teaching you how to use a new technology, adopt a new practice, but thinking about how technology specifically for smallholder farmers could be used to potentially introduce new markets is something that I got really excited by. And so thinking about how technology can facilitate community and that can lead to increased profitability or something along those lines is really intriguing to me right now, and how that could be done.
Yes.
We are conducting some experimentation in that regard. I live in Marin County, just north of San Francisco, and I am a part of the Agricultural Institute of Marin. And so we have 7 farmer markets in our organization, and now we are creating this way for people to be connected to the farming community in a way of it's not only what you eat, but it's the story behind that and how to understand how to support that. When you approach agriculture like place-based and you have an appreciation for that, then you have a tapestry of small ecosystems and regions that provide different things, and everybody is appreciating their own place. Let's think about places like Italy or France, or they are full of small food sheds that are unique, and there's a lot of appreciation. Some of their products, maybe they produce in excess a particular kind of cheese or wine or whatever, and then that the world knows about them. But if you visit those food sheds, there's a lot more, and there's a sense of pride and a sense of belonging to a place that I think commodities and big ag and big food had just disconnected us from this reality. But this is a moment in time where we can reconnect to place and to community. Definitely agree with you.
Really great discussion. I'm going to mention too that one of the partners we're working with is building a collaborative coordination platform called Hilo. And Hilo is to do that, is to help create a space to connect like-minded people within a bioregion that they can potentially organize around potential market access, around offers and requests that they have for sharing on the farm and exchanges. So yeah, just one tool that I'd highlight in this conversation around community building, bridging what we see and what, you know, my husband as a farmer in rural Virginia has, his community of AgTech technical service providers, neighbors, farm associations, and how that can extend to the virtual world and even connect, especially in, I think, the organic sector, where folks like my dad, who live in a very rural area, have very few organic farming counterparts in his county or region to access more people that may have similar challenges and want similar opportunities. So I think there's opportunity, particularly in the organic sector too, around this. All right, well, any questions? I'm gonna take a minute, see if we can get any in the chat. And while we're doing that, I don't think I'm missing any. I think it's important to recognize where we are. We live in a highly digitized world as it is. And so what's at stake? What's at stake in agriculture and the organic sector if we don't harness the power of a community-driven approach to technology stewardship? Anybody? LaKisha.
I would take that. We lose time that we don't have. I really think that the more that we can work together, that is truly what accelerates progress. I've seen it by watching just in some of the projects OpenTEAM, for example, has participated in, just the acceleration of finding a solution by coordinating together. It's just been really amazing, like months, sometimes possibly even years worth of work has been accelerated because you get people in the room working on a challenge together. And so I think we all are aware of the timetable in front of us to resolve some of these challenges, come up with different ways of doing this work, of feeding the people that we need to feed and respecting the people that feed us. And I think that without coordination and working together, we just lose time.
Climate change would tell us that's an important element to consider.
Yeah, I would agree with that, LaKisha. And with organic certification, I mean, it's interesting. The statistics are showing that people want to buy organic food. They're willing to pay the extra for for knowing that it's helpful for the environment and good food for your body. But the industry is growing, but it's still quite small. I'm surprised. So I think that we need the tech to help push that along. And programs like Light Farm. And Light Farm is open source, and as you were saying, it's anybody can take that code and they can modify it. They can make suggestions. They can check for errors. So they're actually there's a lot less bugs and problems with open source programs nowadays. And that program alone it's designed to allow a user to put in all of their management tasks for the day, and that includes all of your inputs that you're using in your organic practices and compliance documents that are associated with that. And it's showing you information such as labor costs per crop, and how much fertilizer you're using, how much of this you're using, how much expense you're using. And at the end of the year, you just hit a button and it spits out your forms that you need to provide for your organic certification. So that's one of those examples of input the data once and then using it in multiple different ways. So I think that programs like that, and I certify, and the more tech that we get going, the more people can break into the organic industry and promote the industry as a whole.
And one thing I would close saying is, let's not forget what we learned today from all of the previous speakers, from David and Karen, what Eric mentioned, humans, people are at the center, and the land and these relationships, this beautiful relationship in agroecosystems, biodiversity, that is at the center. And then technology, we are just peripheral. We are helping the process. We are not the process. Let's not get confused. And we are by no means the important part here. We're just trying to facilitate something that's way more, it's deeper, it's more profound, much more ancient and wise. And yeah, let's be humble. And that was a great takeaway from today. And I really thank the organizers and for making this amazing journey possible.
Agreed. Yeah, I think that's a great final thought. Unless LaKisha, Crystal, if you have any final comments, and we'll close out. Yeah, I think just thank you again to the Organic Center, and we're excited for your hackathon coming up. And yeah, we'll keep working together in community on driving technology that really supports the people. So thanks, everyone.